Josh Owen, welcome to noise11.com. And
thank you very much for having me,
Josh.
Oh, thank you. And to you, it's flying along, and we're already almost in April. It's unbelievable.
Well, it's a busy year for you. There's the work with James Reyne, there's the solo work, and there's the new album. And,
yep.
We're calling this the debut album, but, there was the Josh Owen Band album 14 years ago. So do you consider this your debut album?
Well, I mean, that's what it's called, as Josh Owen, because before that, I guess it was like an official, it was always a band of guys, who were the same guys who played on everything. Whereas this one is, I guess it's like, I've done a Josh Owen acoustic thing, and this one was really me recording pretty much everything at home and then sending it to different places, and mainly during the lockdown time, so yeah, not my first recording, but I guess you could call it this the Josh Owen one, first. Josh Owen, I don't know, venturing out, I guess, by myself in that sense.
Yeah. Well, you can see we're actually going to have a studio audience. Audience is going to have his back to you during the entire interview, but obviously,
that's good. That's fine.
Winston's just the interview.
I love dogs.
This is our studio audience for today. Yeah. So with the Josh Owen Band, as you say, it's the same three guys making all the music. What about songwriting wise? Were the songs you though?
Yeah. So the songs were always my songs, but when you play with the same guys, you have not that I'm comparing myself, but the Dave Matthews Band. I mean, he writes everything, but it's always essentially been the same band, So up until, as I said, quite a while ago, it was always the same band. I'd bring the songs, but the guys had a particular way of playing those songs, and the band had a particular sound. I think for that reason. Whereas this one's a bit more collaborative with, there's about 6 drummers on this album.
Not at the same time, I hope.
No, not at the same time. Not at the same time, and yeah, so collaborative in the sense with a lot of other musicians, and happily to report, the guys that I've played the most music with, they were still part of it as well, But they're all off all over the world, literally, doing their own thing and doing really well. Everyone's still playing a lot, which is great.
So when you're making your own album, you get to make your own phone calls and invite in who wants to come in. So how'd you go about that process? Who's on it?
Well, they're all people I know fairly well. So, I mean, I guess you could start with the first guys that are on it. Essentially, the first iteration, if you want to put it that way, of the band was with a drummer named John Clayton, and his name, everyone knows him as Johnny Hooves, and he ended up doing really well as a drummer. He left. I played with him for many years, and then he went and joined a band called Shapeshifter, which I'm not sure if you know that band in New Zealand. He produces drum and bass himself, and he became the drummer for Shapeshifter, and they ended up touring all over the world. So he actually he did all the mixing on this album. So that's the first sort of big part of this album, which was amazing. So the second guy, who was another drummer that played with me after John left, was a guy named Jason Hira, and Jason played a lot of percussion, drums, and backing vocals, because I consider him possibly the best singing drummer on the planet. Sings like Stevie Wonder and any of those kind of guys, and plays drums even better when he sings at the same time, which is pretty enviable. But he did a lot of the drums, percussion, and in particular, the first single that we've launched, it was a collaboration. I wanted to have a rootsy world sort of sound, and his heritage is he's Mauritian. So that track it's sort of like an Australian Mauritian song. There's a lot of elements from Mauritian music in that song, with a lot of like bluesy, rootsy Australian kind of elements in there. And he sang a lot of stuff on there. There's a chant in the background that's actually is sung in Creole. So he was a big part of it. Bass player wise, me and my dear friend Luke Hodgson, who is a fantastic bass player. I mean, he's playing with all sorts of people. Matt Corby being one of them at the moment that he's touring with. The list that he plays with is just too long to come up with. So Luke Hodgson, the Fissenden brothers, they're two incredible musicians from Western Australia, drummer and bass player. So they have a sixth sense when they play together. It's kind of a freaky thing watching them play drums and bass together as a rhythm section. Pretty amazing. They tour with Guy Sebastian and Pete Murray is their main gigs that they do together. So they're very, very busy men, apart from everything else they do, and a lot of teaching. And Dorian West was another incredible musician. I don't know if you know Dorian, but you know, genius.
Like Goebel and many,
yeah,
been on everything.
He does so much out there, and I was just lucky that he was able to add some elements to the recording. I'm sure I've left someone else off. Johnny Hooves, who mixed it, he did some drums on some of the tracks as well. Yeah, I think that's most of the musicians anyway.
Yeah. So, like, we're waiting until August until As the Night Falls is released. You'll be touring over the next few months with James Reyne. So how much of the album do people get to hear live before they get to hear it streaming and on CD?
Yeah, so we're basically, we because we're doing the support slots, we're doing between half an hour and 45 minutes. The 45-minute set, we try to fit about 9 tracks in. And the shorter set, you know, is about maybe 7. So I would say out of that, when we do 9 tracks, it's pretty much about 85% of the gig is from the album, this album here, with a great little band that has joined me to do this. And yeah, so it's a bit of a night, just because it's quite a lot to do a sound check with James, do a sound check with my group, do the gig with my group, get all of our stuff off the stage, have a 5-minute breather, get on stage and do James stuff, and then at the end of the night, make sure all the gear goes in the right direction. So my gear that goes with James has got to go in the right direction, and the gear for me has to go in the right direction as well. So it's a bit of an undertaking, and after a weekend, I'm pretty wrecked.
Well, the pressure is on you, isn't it, to do a good gig before James, because you're not going to want to get booed off stage in your set and then have to wander back with your tail between your legs and play with him.
Exactly. Covered in rotten tomato and plum juice is not my idea of a good time. But yeah, it's been well received so far, which I'm very grateful for. But it's quite. I actually do find it pretty stressful in some ways, because James is incredibly talented, and his audience are there for him, and he sells out everywhere he goes. And he's always, because he's done this so long, he is I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like every gig he does, it is flawless, which is something to, you know, aspire to. So it's definitely this year I've been having a lot more anxiety dreams where I miss a flight, or I can't get on stage, or I'm looking at the stage and I have to get a tugboat to get to the stage, or like it's at the end of a jetty and I can't get on the jetty, or there's all sorts of weird things that happen when you're sort of anxious about playing, you know. I don't know if sportsmen have a similar dreams, you know, about performance, but I'm sure anyone who has to like expend a lot of energy at one particular moment must have these kind of anxiety-ridden dreams. But that it's definitely gone up this year.
Yeah. Well, that association with James Reyne is very, very tight, isn't it? Because not only are you opening for James and in James's band, the record is coming out on Reckless Records, which is James and Scott Crawford's label.
Yeah, well, which is pretty amazing. And they always knew I was, you know, to be honest, I didn't know if I was ever going to record again. Just because putting out an album is a lot of work, and it's an expensive endeavor to do it properly, you know. And yeah, like James was basically asking me whether I was still working on my own songs, and I always am, you know, for better or worse. And Scott, who manages James too, he kind of approached me and said, "Hey, you're still working on those songs? Oh, I reckon you should finish it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And it sort of went from there, you know. So a process of like just like really finishing the songs and really trying to get them as concise as possible, you know, so no fat, you know, trying my best to, you know, use the Tom Petty philosophy, don't bore us, get to the chorus, you know. So, and you know, not trying to be too self-indulgent in terms of the time of the song. So then it's not like a, you know, and there's no 7-minute solos, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, the Long Way by the Josh Owen Band was 14 years ago. So this is now a 14-year gap, which puts you in the same category as Shania Twain, Extreme, Hootie and the Blowfish, and New Kids on the Block for 14-year gaps between albums.
Yeah, right. Well, never been compared to those guys before, but there you go.
Well, if you want to double that, make it 28 years, that is Eagles from Long Run to Long Road Out of Eden. And I think we have quite the record in Melbourne with our very own Madder Lake, who went 39 years, right. 39 years from Butterfly Farm to the World album. And that was a tie with ABBA from The Visitors to Voyage, was also 39 years. So big gaps in between records, not limited to, you know, just local acts.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing about that is too is, strangely enough, whenever you say you've kind of taken a big gap like that, it sounds like you just sat around and twiddled your thumbs for all that time and didn't do anything. But it's amazing when I look back on that time, I can pretty much, if I do an audit, I can see exactly what I was doing during those whole times, and it's been a pretty productive time in terms of everything else I've done in that time as well, which has all been some incredible musical experiences as well.
So the preview of the album is Hold Your Breath, a very cruisy, bluesy, laid-back groove. How indicative of the album is that track?
That one is, as I said, it's got a lot more worldy elements to it. But if you wanted to talk about the album sonically, I would say that kind of bluesy, rootsy thing with a little bit of, you know, soul-y elements is all the way through the album, you know. So it through the entire album, it has that earthiness to it, if you want to put it that way, that's for sure.
And I guess getting out and performing, you know, that many songs live before the album comes out, you're doing some pretty good market research on what the audience is getting into, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, strangely enough, I just think because particularly the drummer I'm currently playing with, because he's quite explosive, a big hitter, and the band, when you play a lot of these songs live, it's fairly impactful. There's a lot of sonic energy coming off the stage and off the PA. It seems to be getting a really good reaction. So it doesn't. I've tried to make sure that there's no sort of, as I said, indulgent moments during the gig, self-indulgent moments, I mean. And so yeah, I think it's getting a great reaction because we're sort of getting through, and that's something I've actually really learned from James, actually, because he's certainly someone who likes to get through his set. And there's no dips in the energy all through the set. So it's almost, it kind of doesn't let the audience have an excuse for getting bored, you know.
Well, I would imagine at a James Reyne gig, there would be the occasional celebrity that you would also be seeing in the audience.
There is, actually. Like I was telling a friend, like a classic one who turns up Uh, he turns up quite regularly, and he's so funny because he he's a big man, and it's Dipper, the footy player, you know. And I mean, there's lots of different people. He's got a lot of friends who are very well known, you know. And I won't go into all those names because they turn up barefoot, you know, people you don't expect barefoot just sitting side the stage going, this is great, you know. So I've met quite a few of those. But I was just laughing because I was telling a friend 2 days ago about Dipper. When Dipper turns up, pushes through the crowd and slumps over the barrier, you know, the crowd barrier, and puts his hands in the air when James sings Reckless. Almost like he's at a worship concert or something like that. It's pretty funny. And it gets a bit emotional when that song happens. So it's like this massive man with a massive moustache pushes through the audience, slumps over the front there to listen to it, closes his eyes and puts his hands in the air, you know.
All right. Well, we await the album. If anyone wants a preview of the album, get to these James Reyne shows. And I'm no doubt you're going to have your own shows after this run of James shows ends.
Yeah, look, I hope so. We've got our own launch coming up April 7 at Northcote Social Club, and one at the Vanguard in Sydney on the 11th of April. And they'll be our own little shows. So, yeah, it's I'm grateful that James has let us do these support slots, because it's, you know, with big gaps between what you're doing and trying to get original music out there is difficult. So very grateful he's allowing us to do this. And as you say, hopefully we'll get to that point where we'll be able to play to an audience of our own. But who knows? You know, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Josh, good to talk to you as The Night Falls comes out in August. And in the meantime, hold your breath.
Beautiful. Well done. Good one.